Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational Numismatist. Thank you for tuning in. While you're here, please hit that like button and, more importantly, smash that subscribe because it will definitely help me out. Greatly appreciated. Thank you all. So today I want to talk about a trend I have seen recently regarding those who are preparing for there are various different abbreviations for it, but if the SHTF, then you know what I'm talking about. So bottom line is, I saw a prepper channel post a video that talked about what to have in your prepper kit. And, they talk about all the important stuff: food, medical supplies, important documentation, guns, ammo, etc., water, all of the important things. But they also mention that you should have cash and credit cards. And that really struck me because if you are really preparing for the SHTF, do you really think cash or credit cards are going to do you any good? I mean, let's think about this. Let's play out a scenario. The world as we know it is coming to an end. The government fails. The global financial system is teetering on the brink or has collapsed. Take out a dollar bill and take a look at it. It basically says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Well, it's only legal tender because there's a government to stand behind it. There is no actual value. Fiat currency like the US dollar is absolutely worthless with no government to guarantee it and no assets behind it. All right, let's talk about a credit card. Do you really think that a credit card is going to be accepted when SHTF? If the banks fail, the credit card's useless because it's backed by a bank who is essentially loaning the seller the money for your purchase while you then pay it back with interest. Well, if the banks are done, so are you. Not to mention, if the electric grid fails, what are you going to do with a credit card? On top of that, who is going to be willing to accept them? Okay? I'm not going to accept the word of a company that's probably defunct at this point because their name is on a credit card. No, sorry, that's not going to work for me. So what I'm basically getting at, in my opinion, yes, cash and credit cards do have a place in your prepper kit, but should you rely on them alone? Well, in my opinion, no. In my opinion, you should look to precious metals to further diversify your prepper kit and to make sure that even in the event of a global collapse of financial markets, you are still in a position to barter from a position of strength. Now, let's talk about that, okay? Obviously, there is gold and platinum and even palladium. Well, in the event of the SHTF, it is extremely likely, in my opinion, that the value of precious metals will skyrocket. Why? Well, because man, since the beginning of man, has always had an appreciation for and a desire to possess precious metals. They have held their value long before there was a thing called money or a recognized system of exchange. So the problem is, when SHTF, the value of gold and platinum are likely going to be way too valuable for any typical barter transaction unless you purchase them in very small fractional weights. To do so, you're going to pay an extremely high premium. I don't really recommend that unless you are trying to, secure large amounts of wealth, in which case, yes, go for it. The higher the weight, the better. Palladium, a lovely metal, but it's rather obscure and it's unlikely to be widely accepted by people, out in the world who don't really understand what it is. So what does that leave you with? Well, obviously, you're looking at silver, okay? And there are various different ways you can go about owning silver. You can certainly buy, again, in higher weights, you can buy bars or rounds of 2, 5, 10 ounces. Again, that will minimize the premium that you pay above the spot price of silver. However, you are now going to be stuck with a 2 ounce, 5 ounce, or a 10 ounce bar. If you want to make a barter for a relatively small transaction, you're talking about way too big an amount for somebody to be able to accept without making change for. All right, so now you're looking at 1 ounce bars and rounds. Okay, well, that is a much more transactional amount, which is basically what you're looking for when SHTF, at least again, in my opinion. So the 1 ounce and the fractional silver, I've got these. These are the beautiful little Valcambi, 1 gram silver bars. The problem with those is that if you are not familiar with them and somebody hands you this little thing of silver, yeah, it's stamped 999 fine and Valcambi and all that good stuff, but who the hell is Valcambi? How do I know I can trust that? Is it really 999 silver, etc.? You also have the same issue with some of the generic silver bars, the generic silver rounds. They're made by somewhat reputable companies, private companies, but again, unless you have been collecting or investing in precious metals, you may not even be aware of these companies, and again, may not necessarily be willing to accept that it is what is represented. Now, how do you solve that problem? Well, in my opinion, the best way to do that is what some people call junk silver. I like to refer to it as constitutional silver because there is nothing junk, in my opinion, about a $0.50 that has a little over 1/3 of an ounce of silver in it. Okay? That may be what some collectors consider junk because it may be a common date, or like this one, it may be in very, very circulated condition. This is not an expensive coin to a coin collector. It's basically worth the price of silver spot, about 1/3 of an ounce of it, and whatever the small numismatic premium is that somebody might pay to own a 1947 Liberty $0.50, Walking Liberty $0.50. Okay, now, why do I prefer coins like this or a Washington quarter or even a Barber dime? There's one. Okay, now this one is beat to shit, but it is still a Barber dime. It is still recognizable as a U.S. coin. It is very, very old. And personally, I do not recommend hoarding Barber dimes for your transactional silver when SHTF. What I do recommend are mercury dimes because they are far more plentiful and command a much lower premium to the price of silver than a big lot of Barber dimes. I have Washington quarters, but personally, I prefer to use U.S. coins that are silver, but that are not still in circulation. The Roosevelt dime and the Washington quarter are both still circulated coins. The reason I would prefer to use obsolete coins, like a Walking Liberty or a Mercury dime or a Barber quarter, are that because they're obsolete, people are not going to confuse them with modern day coins. All right. Those that know what to look for, turn it to the side. You notice there is no clad line on that coin. You also know that coins minted in the U.S. prior to 1964, dimes, quarters, $0.50, and dollars, were all 90% silver. Now, these are widely recognized. Clearly, this was produced by the United States of America. Not Valcambi, not Germanium Mint, not Everhard, not any of the other personal private companies or mints that produce silver bars and ingots. This was produced by the United States of America. It's recognized worldwide. Not easy to counterfeit, especially when you're talking about, well-circulated coins like this. There is no question what the origin of this is, and anybody who understands anything will realize this particular coin has a little over 1/3 of an ounce of silver in it, period. So what is the barter value? Well, that's a different story. That has to be determined between the buyer and the seller, obviously, whatever that barter value is. But I would much rather have something like this, where given the current value of silver, this is worth roughly $13, $14, as opposed to a 2-ounce or a 5-ounce bar of silver that's worth, $65 to, $175. That's too much to be what I consider a transactional amount. You want to have a nice little cache of silver just like this, where no matter what you want to trade for, you can come up with a combination that makes sense, whether it's very small, even if it is a 1-gram Valcambi. If somebody is willing to accept it in trade, then you're golden. But if not, you've got just a little bit less than a gram of silver in a Barber dime or a Roosevelt dime or any other dime made by the United States. So what it boils down to is you can also get constitutional silver that is 40% silver. From 1965 through 1970, Washington quarters and Kennedy half dollars were made with 40% silver. So whereas this has approximately 1/3 of an ounce of silver, a 40% coin would have, that much less, a little bit less than half that amount. So, maybe close to 1/10 of an ounce of silver, something like that. But they also made, in 1976, they made Kennedy half dollars that were 40% silver for the bicentennial. And then from 1971 through 74, and again in 1976, they made 40% silver Eisenhower dollars. Now, the Eisenhowers, I don't recommend. They're big, they're bulky, they're hard to store in any kind of quantity. And just as importantly, those are meant, or those were made for collectors. The silver coins are typically proof or uncirculated. You're going to pay a premium to the price of silver for those. I don't recommend it to bulk up and be prepared for, again, transactional amounts of silver. If I can take out a quarter that's worth, a silver quarter like this that's worth probably $6 to $8, give or take, I got no problem with that. You need something? Here, $5, $6 worth, beautiful. You got something that's a little bit more? All right, here's $12, $13 worth, beautiful. Oh, $25 I need? Okay, here's another one. What can we do? Talk to me. In my opinion, this is the best way to make sure that your prepper kit is fully secure and diversified against any eventuality. If the banks fail and the governments aren't there to back your fiat currency, you are screwed unless you've got something that man has been able to fall back on through all of time. Precious metals. So, if you found this video enjoyable, please smash that like button and do me a huge solid and hit that subscribe. And until the next time, this is the Educational Numismatist. Thank you all.